Success. Media. Network. 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 Network.
This is your show.
Good day, Successors. I'm Antonio Holman, and welcome to the 4 Principles of Success number 50, where I chat with successful people and entrepreneurs about how they enhance their businesses and lives in the areas of knowledge, health, wealth, and spirituality. And if you want to learn how I've stayed motivated throughout the years, check out my new book, Indulge Your Affirmative Motivation Within, 25 Motivations of Personal Development and Life Success, now on Amazon. Today, we're talking to Dr. Chris Friesen. Dr. Chris is located just outside of Toronto, Canada, and is a psychologist and author of the book, Achieve, Find Out What You Really Want and How to Make It Happen. Dr. Chris has always been fascinated by what makes people successful. As a licensed clinical forensic and neuropsychologist, now primarily helping professional, national, Olympic, up-and-coming elite athletes and other achievers such as professionals, entrepreneurs, executives, academics, and writers, Dr. Chris helps them achieve their personal and professional potential. He is currently director of Friesen Sport and Performance Psychology, a contributor to Success.com, and the creator of FriesenPerformance.com. Dr. Chris, are you ready to help our listeners prepare for success?
I sure am, Antonio.
All right, let's get started. All right, Dr. Chris, aside from your business world, tell us a little bit about your personal life.
Yeah, so I'm a pretty athletic guy. I really like to do something called biohacking, which is a very broad term. It means you take things from science, biology, supplements, other biohacks, and basically try to improve yourself, improve your physiology, improve your performance. So I'm obsessed with that kind of thing. I've been obsessed with that since I was a teenager. I have a 5-year-old daughter, and I love spending time with her. I'm from a big city, Toronto. I'm just outside of Toronto now in a smaller town. And I love learning, reading, and spending time with my daughter and my wife. Yeah.
For those who may not know, tell us a little bit more about your organization, Friesen Performance.
Yeah, so this is a both in-person and via phone or Skype sort of coaching and high-performance consulting gig, you could say. Essentially, what I do is in person, mostly athletes, but also other high achievers, like you noted in the description, contact me because they want to take their game to the next level. So I work with people one-on-one, and often these people, like I said, are calling me. They're let's say a professional athlete. They're not actually located near me, so we do it all on Skype and or telephone. And what we do is basically help people achieve their potential. So these are athletes who are usually feel like they're not performing to their best. For example, getting really anxious before major events like the Olympics or certain games in team sports like hockey. Big games where scouts are coming, or playoff games, and they are trying to just use the layest stuff from neuroscience, sports psychology, executive coaching to basically improve. And so I do most of the work one-on-one. I also offer something else called biofeedback and neurofeedback, which is a fancy way of measuring physiology or brain functioning and basically hacking it and getting people to achieve the proper states that are most conducive to their performance for their particular sport. So that usually, most of it involves in person, although lately I've accessed some devices that I can have people order themselves, or they can purchase it off me and they could train, and I would basically help them from afar. So that's basically in a nutshell what do we do. I also wrote a book, like you noted, and I'm in the process of writing the second book in the series. And I do some writing as well for Success Magazine and other things like that.
How did you initially get into the field of psychology, then into athletic psychology, and how does athletics compare to the psychology of business?
Yes. So originally, what got me into it was I was a competitive goalie in hockey. We could take it a step further back. I was actually a really bad student in school, all the way up until basically my last year of high school. I was barely passing. When I was around 12, I was always into sports, but when I was around 12, I got into competitive hockey, and I did really well. Eventually, though, my hockey career didn't go where most kids' dreams want them to go. I was cut from a very high-level team, and when I was about 16 years old, and I had no team at that point, and it was a rude awakening for me, and I realized I better do something with my life, because if I don't take control of my life, life is going to take control of me. And I saw people who I knew who didn't try in school, didn't do well in school, and they weren't doing very well. And I realized that if I'm not going to play hockey, I better figure something out. And I really got into, through hockey, I thought about it. Through hockey, I was really into nutrition, various exercises. And then only at the very end did I discover self-help books and things like Tony Robbins, Stephen Covey, and reading biographies like Arthur Ashe, former tennis player, and one on Christopher Reeves, who's, as we all know, Superman and his paralysis and eventual death. But these really helped me realize I had more control over myself or the trajectory of my life. So I realized I really love these subjects and decided I want to go to university. And so what I did was I really tried hard my last year. I got into university barely, and I continued to apply what I was learning through self-help books to what I was doing. And my grades went from the lowest grades to the highest grades, and it was a big turnaround for me. Eventually got into, my first degree was in health science, and I was thinking of going into medicine or chiropractic, and realized that I was more interested in the mind, in the brain. And I eventually finished that degree, did another degree in psychology, got into graduate school in clinical psychology, and did my master's and PhD in those areas. And throughout those schooling, I always wanted to go back and work with high achievers because that's my own personal interest. But that doesn't exist when you go through these programs. And so I realized that what I could do was really work on trying to become the best psychologist I could be by working with as many different populations and the most difficult populations I could find. So I would work with hardened criminals. I would work with people with brain injuries, people with police officers. I would work with people with depression, anxiety, that kind of thing. And you have to do all these hoops to become a licensed psychologist, and from the beginning of university to the end, it was about 13 years to do, which is a long time. And it wasn't until after that I realized I wanted to get back in touch with my original interests. Even though I was constantly studying this stuff on the side, it was not when I'm working in a hospital, it's not part of it. I do work with concussions, and I was getting exposed to athletes, and that also helped pave the way. So I really started working more with athletes, and started getting some training and executive coaching as well, and just basically started to do more and more of it, made a website, eventually wrote a book. And the other question was some of the difference between athletes and non-athletes. Interestingly, they have a lot of overlap. A lot of high achievers, whether they're executives, whether they're entrepreneurs, there's a mindset that they share with athletes, and so therefore a lot of the strategies are common. Of course, it really depends on the person because everyone's coming in with different goals, different problems. And so it really depends on what they're looking for. So there's a lot of commonalities between them. And of course, there are some differences. Some sports are individual sports, whereas most business endeavors, professional endeavors, even being an entrepreneur, there's still a lot of relying on other people. So there's always issues with motivation. There's always issues with proper goal setting. Often there's issues with people who are getting anxious or not being able to control their negative emotions. There can also be issues of getting along with people, getting along with teams, coaches, vendors, that kind of thing. And so it really depends on the person and what they're trying to improve. So that's that in a nutshell.
When you were writing the book Achieve, what was your target audience? Who were you really having in mind when you were writing that book?
That's a great question. Originally, I was thinking, I need to write something. I found what I was doing when I was working with a lot of high achievers, athletes or non-athletes, that I was repeating myself with people. I thought, it'd be great if they just had a book and they could save. I'm all about efficiency and saving people money and getting more results faster. So I originally thought I should write a manual. And as I was starting that process, I realized, this might have wider appeal to people. And I've read hundreds of self-help books since I was 16 years old. Some of them I thought were great. For example, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People with Stephen Covey. And a lot of them I didn't like. And so in a way, I wanted to write a book that basically was the type of self-help book I liked. So for example, it was based on research, but it was not just basically spewing out study after study with how many subjects and this. I find even though I'm a psychologist, I find that boring when I'm reading a self-help book. I wanted a book, and I personally like reading self-help books that really touch on the author's experience. Often, some of the more scientifically backed self-help books are usually researchers, often psychologists, and they don't really have much experience with what they're talking about. And I also I like the idea when I read a book where it's for example, a psychologist or a peak performance coach that actually works with people. So they're talking about things that work with their athletes. So to get into the book, the content, to get into the book, there were sort of certain criteria that had to be met. There had to be science backing it up. I had to have done it myself and be able to say it works. And I've had to have used it with people, high achievers, and found it worked as well. And so, and again, like I said, not boring with too much. Of course, there has to be some detail, but with not too much science or research studies. So that was, what I wanted to do with that book, and it really did well. It's still doing well, and it's actually a series of books. The next book is actually going to focus more on other aspects of success. So the first book is really about basically understanding who you are, which is your personality, understanding what your strengths and weaknesses are, finding out what your values are, and then coming up with a mission statement, very similar to Stephen Covey, the idea of having a mission statement, personal mission statement. And only then in the book, it's a process that's almost like a workbook. You start to work on your actual goals. Once you've figured out all these other things, who you are, your basic biology or neurology, which is your personality, what you're good at, your strengths, your skills, and your weaknesses, and then really what's important to you, what are your values. And it's all full of exercises to basically go through these steps. And at the very end, we basically focus on, okay, how do you set goals properly? And the last chapter is basically how to make sure you can stick to your goals on a day-to-day basis. So to me, this was the real bare bones, the very beginning of success. You cannot be successful if you don't know your why. You cannot be successful if you're working against your own biology. For example, your personality. You cannot be successful if you don't know how to set goals and set proper goals. So this is really the backbone for the future books. I'm still not sure if I'm going to do 2 future books or just 1 more book. I'm still working that out.
Now, that kind of brings me to the next question. When you're comparing athletes to high-achieving athletes to high-achieving business people, and when it comes to achieving goals, what is the main big thing that sticks out in your mind to the cognition of those 2 high-achieving groups?
What do you mean by cognition? You mean the mindsets, or?
Yeah. What are the things that they understand that you need? What is the one big thing that they understand to achieve the goals that they set?
Yeah. So what they share, what they have in common, and this is usually, if I had to ever give one tip for success, this would be it. The most successful athletes and the most successful high achievers, for example, business people, what they do is, the one thing they share is they don't make their day-to-day decisions about what to do with their time or what to do with their behavior on a day-to-day basis. They don't make it based on their mood, like if they're in the mood, if they're feeling inspired. They don't make it based on their energy levels, if they're feeling energized or not. They don't even make it often based on their environmental circumstances. They make it based on their values and goals. They really know who they want to be, how they want to live their life, and what they want to achieve. Because even who you want to be and what you want to achieve are two different things. Your values are, basically descriptors of how you want to be on a day-to-day basis. Your goals are things that you can check off, like get your PhD, check it off. Publish a book, check it off. Goals and values are two different things. But when you live your life and you make your day-to-day decisions solely based on these things, not on your energy levels. And I'll just give you an example. For example, and I know you wrote a book, Antonio, so you can probably attest to this as well. If we only wrote the book, like took the time to start writing whenever we were doing this on a day-to-day basis, if we felt inspired, if our energy was good, if we, our schedule is perfectly free and there's no stress, for example, we would never finish the books. What we would do is, no matter what we felt, we already scheduled it. I am going to publish this book by this date, for example. And no matter how inspired you feel, you open that Word document or Scrivener, which is what I use, Scrivener document, and you start typing. And it's interesting because I have this little tidbits in the book. It's called the 5-minute rule. Basically, it's this. Our brains, human brains, are really good at over-predicting how difficult something is going to be. It's really a cure to procrastination. So what I mean by that is what we do is we tell ourselves when we don't feel like doing something, we make a deal with ourselves. I'm going to do this activity, whether it's working out, whether it's doing my taxes, whether it's writing my book, whether it's calling customers, whatever it may be, whether it's training, going to the gym, whatever it may be. I'm telling myself, I can do this. I'm going to do this for 5 minutes. If it's as painful, if it's as painful or as annoying or any of those things as I'm predicting, I give myself 100% permission to stop. And you're just going to give it 5 minutes. And 98% of the time, you start it, and your negative predictions never turned out to be true. It turns out to be not as bad, and you feel great because you did it anyways. And I'm going to give you another silly example. This is another strategy I use with a lot of my clients. It's a newer one. It's not in my book that I just came up with. It's called the Cold Shower Challenge. It's basically, have you ever seen like Tony Robbins where he has people walk over hot coals?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's similar to that. I don't know exactly his purpose for doing that. I guess I have an idea, but I've never been to his workshops. And basically, again, our minds are great at predicting how bad things are going to be or whether we're going to like something or not. They over-predict how bad things will be. And so what we do is before you have a cold shower, so it's for 5 days, you basically say, I'm going to have a cold shower every single day for 5 days. That's my goal. I'm going to do it no matter what. But what's going to happen is you get up in the morning and you realize, oh yeah, I'm doing this cold shower challenge. Your mind is going to throw up all kinds of roadblocks saying, I need a hot shower. This is stupid. I'm going to like shake and freeze to death in there. Any excuse your mind can come up with, it will. And what you're going to do is you're going to say, these are just thoughts. I'm having thoughts that I can't do this. I'm having thoughts that I need my hot shower to survive. But I've already made a decision that this is what I'm going to do. So thanks, mind, for just doing what you're doing, because minds are programmed to protect us. And that's what it's doing. It doesn't want us to feel any pain, even if it's in our best interest in the long run. It's always out to protect us in the short term, including any uncomfortable feelings. So you say, thanks, mind. And what you do is you do it anyways. And you do it 5 days in a row. And basically what happens is you get really good at unhooking yourself from your negative thoughts. And this is basically what I'm talking about on steroids. It's sort of a something that, and it's not dangerous. Like walking on hot coals, you're not going to buy hot coals and do that every day. It's a one-time thing with Tony Robbins, right? But it's a very powerful strategy because it really teaches you that you can do things even if your mind is telling you that you can't. And that's just one example of some of the things I do.
Okay, I have a good question for you here. It has been said before that there is an actual scientific connection to high-achieving business people and sociopathic behavior. Is that true?
Interesting. Yes, sociopaths, or what psychologists like to call psychopaths. Because I'm a forensic psychologist, I don't work in that field anymore. But I did work in prisons and with people who've killed people, and with psychopaths and child abusers, and you name it. Very interesting, very difficult. So yes, there's a famous psychologist named Robert Hare, Hare. He has a book called Snakes in Suits. Robert Hare is the top researcher and top expert in the entire world on psychopaths, and he's works for the FBI and all these sorts of things. And he's a psychologist, and he developed something called the Hare Psychopathy Checklist, which is a special type of interview that psychologists are trained to do, psychologists and forensic psychiatrists, to diagnose whether someone's a psychopath. I've gotten the training a number of years ago, maybe a decade ago. And so, there's some truth to that. And so, for example, psychopaths generally, there's a number of traits that make up whether someone's a psychopath, but psychopaths generally tend to have low levels of negative emotions. In my book, actually, that's one of the 5 basic personality dimensions I get people to rate themselves on, because it's got a huge amount of scientific research behind it. But they have very low levels of negative emotion. They don't really feel much guilt. They don't really feel much anxiety. They may feel angry, like they're not robots, but they don't have a lot of negative emotion. And what happens is when you're a child, when we become socialized, in other words, learning what's right and wrong and what we should and shouldn't do, we need to feel negative emotions or anxiety and guilt and shame to actually learn. So most of our learning of whether we're being socialized or not happens as a child. So, for example, if you say something or do something silly in class and then your teacher points you out and you feel embarrassed, you're less likely to do that again. Or if you're in a social situation and you do something that's inappropriate as a child, and the other kids make fun of you or ignore you, or then you're going to learn because there's a negative emotion associated with that. People who are psychopathic, because most of it is biological and genetic as well. They don't really have a lot of anxiety. So as children, they don't get socialized. So this is the reason. So when the teacher scolds them, there's no learning, because they don't feel much negative emotions associated with that. So what happens is, as they get older, most of these people end up in prison. So when this is an extreme example, and this is an example of someone I worked with. They're walking down the street and they realize they want some cigarettes, but they don't have any money. But there's an old lady walking towards them with a purse. So they punch her in the face and take the purse and go buy some cigarettes. And often some guys aren't very smart, so they get arrested for these things. That was an example of someone whose IQ wasn't very high, but he was also a psychopath because he doesn't understand the consequences, because we learn mostly emotionally. Like when we touch the stove and it burns, your mom and dad can tell you, don't touch the stove 1,000 times, but we learn way better emotionally. So once we touch it once and it hurts like hell, we never touch it again. So this is the way the brain works. It learns mostly emotionally. And so these people mostly end up in, like I said, prison. But when you have, it also depends on your environment growing up. If you're growing up in the ghetto and you have your brother is, basically involved with crime. All your friends are involved with crime. Your mother is barely. You don't have a father. Your mother's barely there. You can have the same genetic makeup or biology of a psychopath, and you're more likely to become a criminal. But if you're growing up in a more stable home, these people, and also if they're higher intelligence, they tend to learn what they should do logically and end up going into professions, like you said, into some business, like become executives or CEOs. And again, don't get me wrong, not all CEOs and executives are psychopaths, but the traits of basically not having a lot of anxiety, not having fear, in other words, you'd be more likely to take risks, not often psychopaths because they don't like to back down. They're pretty stubborn as well, so they will keep pushing forward on things that other people might back down, and they don't have problems firing people and stepping on people or stabbing them in the back to climb up the corporate ladder, for example. So, is it a good thing? No, I think it's just the system sets it up that way, that some people with psychopathic traits, again, it's on a continuum. It's not like you're a psychopath or you're not. It's really a continuum. Some of us have a lot of traits. Some of us have very little. And, psychopathic traits can be adaptive in that environment where it's all about performance. And basically, being cutthroat is it's not considered a bad thing. And so, these guys can go far. But that doesn't mean they're not going to be killers too. They're not going to go around and murder half the people like the serial killers. But those traits can help you excel. And for example, some surgeons and some police officers, have some of those traits that they're pretty fearless. They tend to be competitive as well, and they tend to sometimes they're impulsive. But to be a surgeon, you have to have nerves of steel, for example. And in some aspects of policing, you have to have nerves of steel as well. So that's kind of a long-winded answer to your question, but that's sort of a good idea of what's going on, in my opinion.
Yeah, if we had all day, I could talk to you all day if we didn't have a time constraint, because this subject matter fascinates me big time. Yeah,
cool.
I love it.
Cool.
As we all know, life's a bunch of ups and downs, and nothing's ever always good. Throughout your journey, what was that time you felt most unsuccessful?
For me, it was in high school when I was doing so poorly in school. Psychologists call this self-efficacy, which is really just your belief in yourself. It's a little bit different than confidence. Confidence has more to do with like social confidence. At least that's what people think. Self-efficacy is your belief in your ability to do particular things. So my self-efficacy with school was so low. And, it just made me not want to, I didn't do well, and then I didn't want to try. I was really not interested in that stuff. And it wasn't until I really discovered sports and applying the things I was mentioning earlier, some of the self-help thing to sports, to improving, that I developed this self-efficacy, this belief in my ability. Wait a sec, I went from the worst goalie to the best goalie in that lower division. And then I skipped an age, and it was all because I took the time to study, nutrition, physiology, exercise physiology. I was just a kid, and also studying goalies, for example, on tape. I'd record all these on my VHS. I'd record all these goalie clips and put it in slow motion and watch it, and then try to act it out. And all of a sudden, I realized I had all this power. So that was a low point. And it was actually interesting. When I was in grade 8, because my marks were so bad, there was myself and another student. His name was Steve, and we were the worst students, and we were forced to go tour basically the high school that they send most of the delinquents to, and that was what I call a scared straight moment. It was a scary place. It's full of gangs, and it's full of basically a lot of dangerous people. In Toronto, since then they've closed the school down. And actually, when I was writing the book, I went back and I was looking at it, and it turned out about 3 or 4 years after I was there, doing the tour in grade 8, one of the students, I think, shot the guidance counselor and the vice principal, I believe. And there was just a lot of violence, and they ended up shutting the whole school down. But that was probably my lowest point. It scared the crap out of me, and I realized this isn't good. All my friends are going to this other high school, and I might have to go to this one. They brought me there, Steve and I, there in the middle of the year. And they basically said, if your grades don't come up, you're going here. That's it. You don't have a choice. And that was a pretty low moment for me. But again, it was only half of the equation. That didn't tell me what my passions were. That was me being motivated by fear. And in other words, this is where I did not want to go. But at that point in between grade 8 and grade 9, I didn't have an idea of where I wanted to go. So that wasn't until later in high school, and like I said, I discovered sports and realized I actually have a lot of fun, studying the body and some of the psychology. That's really interesting to me. And of course, playing sports. But I hate studying Shakespeare. Like, I found it painful. And I hated, math. It was just, what is the point of this? That was my thinking as a 14-year-old, 15-year-old. So that was probably the lowest point in my life. Since that time, things have been good, very good. Things have only sort of accelerated in terms of my definition of success. So that was my lowest point. I'm glad it was a long time ago.
What was your most challenging client-related situation, and how did you resolve it?
Client-related situation, yeah. Okay, I'll give you just to go back to that forensic example. When I was a resident, sort of after you've done all your PhD and all the training, you work for a year or two. Usually in a hospital setting. So I was half the time was in a forensic criminal side. And so I had to work with individuals, one individual in particular, who was a psychopath. He was also a child abuser, pedophile. And that was very, very challenging. Obviously for obvious reasons. So my job was to help him, like to do therapy. He was mandated as part of in Canada, they have different sort of rules than you guys have in the U.S., but it's something called long-term offender. That means he's done his prison time, but the government doesn't want to let him completely out because they know he's dangerous. So he has to continually attend, be on parole basically his whole life, and continually attend therapy. And it was very challenging because this is a guy who was dangerous, not very likable, forced to see me. I'm forced to see him, and eventually I realized that, it's hard to look at the file of what the person did, and then this person sitting in front of you, and you see them every week for a long period of time. It's my job is to help that person. And I finally figured out, because he was a psychopath, that what I really needed to do was to help him to basically come up with get on the same page, come up with goals we can both agree on. So we both, because I'm not going to be able to change his interest in children, his sexual interest in children. I'm not going to be able to change that. That's unchangeable. So what we did was, I figured we need to work on what we can both agree on is a good goal, which is, I'm sure you don't want to go back to prison, and that's why I don't want you going back to prison either. And of course, you touching kids puts you back in prison. And so we were able to work together on this mutual goal. And I didn't have to, agree with what he did. I was able to put some of my opinions or feelings aside, because I'm doing this. If I was just pissed off at him and he could tell, that wasn't going to help. I needed to protect society, and this is the way I had to do it. So, that's a clinical example.
What do you feel was the one hardest thing for you to overcome in your business that you've since conquered?
I think one of the hardest things was to put myself out there. Interestingly, this is how it kind of rolled out. A number of maybe 3-4 years ago, I forget how many years ago it was now, I had someone call me and said, "Look, I want you to be on my podcast," because at that point I was still working with high achievers. I didn't have a book. I had no sort of social media or public profile really. And he called me up and he wanted to come to my house or my office to interview me. And I'd never done any media work in my life up to that point. And I said no. And I was fearful of it. I was anxious of the idea. So I hung up the phone and I just started to think about it. One of the things I do when I work with patients or clients is I say, look, you have to repeatedly face the things that make you afraid. And that's even if it's in small doses. And I thought, what am I afraid of? And I thought, I'm afraid I'm going to say something stupid. My colleagues are going to hear it and think that I'm not smart, or I'm not, good at what I do, or I'm just going to get freezed when he asks me questions, not know what to say. So So I realized I was letting my emotions dictate my life. And so I decided to call the guy back. I said, no, yeah, I'll do it for sure. Come on over. So he came by. We did the interview. Of course, I was nervous at the beginning, especially. I had never done anything like this before. That's natural. And then I realized it was so much fun to talk about my favorite subjects. It was talking mostly about, just like we are, about peak performance and that kind of thing. And that really changed things for me. At around the same time, I started taking those cold showers. I've been doing it for about a long time now. I stopped it. I did it for a bit and stopped, and now for about 2 years straight, I've done it straight with no hot showers. But I was just starting to do that as well, and I really started to realize that I could put myself out there, and it's fun, and it's I think it's good for me. It's good for people, and people seem to be interested. And so this really got me. I started writing the book around that time. Things really started to take off. I started to put myself out there, which was something for years. When you go to graduate school for university for 13 years, it's not about business. It's about science and knowledge. It's about being really humble. It's so you're socialized into a certain way of being. And I realized, it kind of took me away from my interests. And I realized, this is for what I'm interested in, this is what I need to do. And it's actually, despite my fear of it, it's actually a good thing. And of course, even writing the book, I had all kinds of doubts about, I've never written a book. What if nobody buys the book? What I'm writing right this second is garbage. And our mind produces thoughts like that to protect us. It doesn't want us to take risks. And so, I would just say, thanks, mind. I know you're trying to protect me. And I return my attention back to just the process of writing the book. And it turned out well. So that was, I say that would be the best example.
Yeah, that's similar to doing this podcast, because the old imposter syndrome comes out and it starts to question your ability, but you just keep pushing forward.
Yes, exactly. It's a universal thing. We all think it's unique to ourselves, and it's true. And that's one of the things that also motivates me to do these podcasts, and is to be, and just like in my book, to be totally honest that, despite me being a psychologist and spending all these years, we're all human and we all make these mistakes and we all fall for these, traps of our mind trying to protect us and put up barriers. And it's part of the human experience. It's really, because a lot of people have athletes come in and they believe they're the only ones with doubts. And they actually come in and say, look, I want to have no doubts whatsoever. And I often tell them, let's just do a thought experiment. Let's pretend I can make you have 100% confidence you're going to win the gold medal in 6 months at the Olympics. And what's going to happen when your alarm goes off at 5 a.m. tomorrow when you have no doubts you're going to win? What's going to happen when you're training and you're getting tired and there's an option to continue past the, extra time on the mat or on the court, but you have the option of going home? What are you going to do? Are you really going to go? And what's going to happen when you show up at the Olympics and your competitor, let's say, has equal skills, had actually a lot of self-doubts? Who's going to win? And the reality is self-doubts are actually good because they can motivate us to push forward. Having no self-doubts and too much confidence is actually a bad thing. But we often think that we look at others, that guy looks like he has so much confidence and no doubts, and I have all these doubts. There must be something wrong with me. But it's not true. All athletes have doubts. There's a recent documentary with Mike Tyson. He would even say he's walking to the ring and he is scared. He is scared. He doesn't look scared, but he says, I was scared. I was so scared I was going to lose. And George St. Pierre, a UFC fighter, well, he's been open about this for years, saying, he's got lots of doubts, he's got lots of fear, and that he uses that to motivate himself. And it's normal. He says anyone who goes into a ring who has no doubts, who has no fears, is lying to you. And although there might be some guys who are psychopathic, so they may not have too many, but they probably wouldn't last very long, I'll be honest, because they wouldn't improve. So yeah, I can go on forever there, but I'll stop there.
What one thing in your business are you currently struggling to overcome?
Things are going really well. I'm trying to actually get better office space, so it's kind of a minor issue. Things are going really well. Of course, I'd always like to work with more high achieving athletes. I get a lot of local people contacting me that are sort of lower level, and sometimes they don't even want to see me. Their coach is forcing them to see me, or their manager is telling them they should see me, or their husband is telling them they should see me. And those people are harder to work with because they're not very motivated. To get more people that are really motivated, that are really into biohacking, whether it's supplements, whether it's neurofeedback, whether it's, like I said, the 5-minute rule, the cold water, the cold shower challenge, people who are really wanting to take their game to the next level, or their life to the next level, those people, I would love to have more of those people to work with. So finding time to write my second book is difficult. I'm in sort of high demand for the stuff I do, and I'm doing a lot of continuing education and courses and studying, so it's really hard to get time now to write the second book, but I'm about to really go balls to the wall in about a month from now. I'm going to really put the time in to make it happen. So, yeah.
What do you feel is your one biggest business triumph to date?
Business triumph. I'd say writing my book. It's not a huge money maker, but it's probably one of the things I'm most proud of. It took a lot of work, and it does establish you as an expert or legitimize what you do. And so I have a lot of people read my book or listen to it on Audible or read it on a Kindle, and they will they realize, I want to work with this guy. And so they'll contact me, and I love that because I know, or they heard me on a podcast, or they hear me on read one of my articles I've written, and I try to make my personality come out, because when you work one-on-one with people, the gelling between the personalities is really important. You have to believe that the person knows what they're talking about, and you guys are on the same page in terms of what you're trying to achieve. So when I get people like that, that really lights my fire. They said, I read your book. I have guys from all over saying, I read your book. I'd like you to walk me through it. Like, I'd like you to, help me with or individual parts of it, and I just love that. I was like, oh, this is great. This is, I would do this for free. This is, so writing the book has opened some doors, more internationally or nationally, as opposed to seeing most people locally. So that has been, to me, I guess, the biggest business triumph.
What do you feel is your one biggest personal triumph today?
Biggest personal triumph would be that whole lesson of making my day-to-day decisions about what to do with my time is based on who I want to be as a person, my values, in other words, and my goals, and not letting my emotions, my energy levels, and all that control me. And this happens to everybody, but once I really figured that out, and I figured that out at a pretty young age, as a teenager, that really changed things for me. And that's the one principle that I try to live by every day. And I'm very productive, I guess you could say. And so this was a game changer in my life. And I really like to let other people know that it's easier said than done, but that is the key to success. There's no other key to success. If you don't have this, you can't be successful. Because if you only do things when you're motivated, when you're inspired, you'll never do anything. The greatest writers, Stephen King, these people don't just write when they feel like it. The greatest athletes don't train when they feel like it. The greatest performers don't, just do it when they feel like it. They do it regardless. That's what, life is hard. And there's a difference between pain and suffering. There's always pain. To have a meaningful life and a successful life, you have to feel pain. It's part of the package. It's the price of admission. But whether you suffer depends. If you are forced to do things that aren't in line with your values and your goals, you're going to feel like you're suffering. But if you're going through pain that is in line with your values and your goals, and it's for a bigger purpose, or either a bigger purpose, almost a religious purpose, or a purpose of just like, these are particular goals and values that I want to live by, then you don't suffer. It's so understanding that, there's going to be suffering, there's going to be pain, but the suffering is optional. So I think that's important. And just on a related note, I have a sort of general theory that I'm sure is not unique to me, that our population has become softer and softer physically and psychologically, in the sense that we have everything handed to us these days in the sense of technology. We have cars, we have bicycles. No time in history have we had it so easy. We have heat, we have air conditioning. So our bodies don't feel a lot of stress. We don't have to work so much physical labor as most people did in the past. So, and we've also don't have to feel emotional pain. For example, if you're bored, which is emotionally painful to feel bored, you can check Facebook, you can go on the internet, you can do all these things. There's so many possible distractions from boredom. All these things make us physically and mentally weak. And what we do, if you start to apply and understand this, that when you face things that are actually painful, but that are in the service of something important, you are going to become stronger. So cold showers is an example. Basically making yourself do things even though you don't feel like doing them is an example. Those all build mental toughness. And this is important. And this is why there's in the biohacking world, there's a big push now with saunas and these sorts of things, because there's physiological research showing that cold showers and saunas actually make you healthier, because that's what our bodies were designed to deal with, harsher environments than we deal with now. And our bodies aren't meant to sit all day. I have a treadmill desk. You don't run on it. You stand and walk. And I go back and forth. Sometimes I sit for 20 minutes and I walk or stand. Sitting all day is very bad for you. And we're starting to realize this now. And some of this stuff is going to be my second book.
Hang tight, Successors. We'll return to our conversation with Dr. Chris Friesen, as well as quick success after a word from our sponsors. Podcasters, want more listeners? Check out promosharecast.com and join the community today. That's promosharecast.com. Join today and get the first month free, and you'll also receive 50% off for a lifetime membership. Sign up today. promosharecast.com. Are you a tense, tired, busy person who works day in and day out, who tends to lack the proper sleep and energy? Using modular supplements, health-related articles, recipes, life hacks, and more, Bellison can help. With quality as high as Bellison, you're buying from a company that cares about the environment and only uses premium vegan supplements. That's Bellison.com. Want to learn how to cook healthy, exercise, and meditate in just 30 minutes a day? Bellison.com. Want to feel healthy, energetic, and focused like me? Bellison.com. To receive a 10% discount at checkout. Whoa, hold on. Now receive even more health benefits with a 20% discount at checkout. Go to Bellison.com with the coupon code the4POS to get your 20% off now. Visit Bellison.com. That's BELISAN.com. Compassion and quality without compromise. Bellison.com. And we're back with author and psychologist Dr. Chris Friesen. Now we get into the part of the show I like to call Quick Success, where you, Dr. Chris, can inspire the successors to enhance their lives in the areas of knowledge, health, wealth, and spirituality. Dr. Chris, what are you currently doing to enhance your knowledge?
Right now, I'm taking some online courses for something called acceptance and commitment therapy, which you can also use with coaching. It's very similar to what I've been talking about. I'm studying, because I'm a neuropsychologist, I also do something called neurofeedback and quantitative EEGs. So I spend a lot of my evenings watching videos of conference workshops on the brain and that kind of thing. And that's really interesting. I'm using it with my coaching clients, my athletes, and some of my clinical clients as well, getting down to understand what's going on in their brains and then hacking their lives and their environments and what they do with their bodies and put into their bodies to maximize their abilities.
What are you currently doing to enhance your health?
I do a lot of things. I do neurofeedback on myself. Speaking of saunas, I have an infrared sauna that I use after I work out almost every morning. In the sauna, I meditate. And I also do a bit of yoga.
Wow, that sounds interesting. Infrared sauna.
Mm-hmm.
What are you currently doing to enhance your wealth?
Just I wouldn't say hustling is the right word. I don't mean hustling as in terms of getting more customers, but I mean hustling in the sense of constantly trying to make myself better, constantly trying to learn more, trying to make sure that the people I work with get the results they want so they can tell other people. Because that is the best way to get referrals is to people who can say that they've done it and they found it helpful. So that's to me, and I'm relatively conservative with my money. I spend a lot of money into gadgets in my work, in learning, and then when it comes to my my car, my house, those things, I live a pretty conservative lifestyle.
What are you currently doing to enhance your spirituality?
You can always do more, but I'm doing yoga, and with yoga, there's I'm not religious per se, but with yoga, there's this talk of being one with nature, and with my daughter, I often talk about Mother Nature, and try to feel awe and appreciate what Mother Nature has to offer. So really trying to get curious about life and about the way things are.
Are there any modern technologies or apps that you use to achieve success?
For writing, I use Scrivener, which is a very fancy, it's like Microsoft Word, but much fancier, much better. For email, I use something called Unroll.me, which takes all these emails from all these lists and organizations and all the sort of, I wouldn't call them junk mail, but things you want to read, puts them into a single email at the end of the day or the beginning of the day you can choose. And so it's really saved me from getting all these emails throughout the day. The personal emails and the emails from people that they're contacting me for the first time, they come right to me, but these other ones come at the end of the day. So that's another good one that I use.
What new thing, book, activity, technology, or skill are you really excited to learn and dive into?
I'm for the last 4 years now, neurofeedback and quantitative EEG has been fascinating. I finally invested the tens of thousands of dollars to be able to do quantitative EEG in my practice, and basically not only understand people's behaviors and their backgrounds, but now I can measure their actual brain as well. And that has been one of the coolest technologies. When I give people feedback, it blows them away. It blows me away every time how accurate it can be. And I can't get enough of it.
How can our listeners connect with you?
My website, friesenperformance.com. I have some of my articles there. My podcasts I've been on are there. There's tips, articles for success. I'm on Twitter, so at FriesenPerform. I'm on Facebook. If you look up Friesen Sport and Performance Psychology, you can find me there as well. So those are the best places.
Finally, Dr. Chris, what's your definition of success?
My definition of success is leading your life, again, based on your values and goals, whatever those may be, whether you want to be a millionaire, whether you want to be a professional athlete, whether you want to just be a good dad, whatever that is, as long as you are working towards being the person you want to be, to me, that's success, because you never actually fully achieve it. It's always a work in progress. And so, basically living your life as much as you can based on your values and goals, and try not to get pushed around by your negative thoughts, your negative emotions, and the people in your life that may not be helping you, may be holding you back. Just continuing to go towards your goals and being the person you want to be, that to me is success.
Successors, I hope you've enjoyed my conversation with Dr. Chris Friesen. Please check out more successful free content like this at the4pos.com, as well as rate, review, and don't forget to subscribe wherever you find podcasts. Thanks for listening, and prepare for success. Thanks, Dr. Chris.
Thank you.
If you want to do more, earn more, be more, and stay more motivated, visit Amazon.com right now for a copy of Indulge Your Affirmative Motivation Within, 25 Motivations of Personal Development and Life Success. Get it now at Amazon.com. Podcasters, want more listeners? Check out PromoSharecast.com and join the community today. That's PromoSharecast.com. Join today and get the first month free, and you'll also receive 50% off for a lifetime membership. Sign up today. PromoSharecast.com.